Empowering arts practitioners through patronage. We'll have powerful patrons, facilitators, and philanthropists discuss the role of strategic philanthropic investment and the power of patronage toward educating people about the arts and the business of art. Please welcome Chairperson, JSW Foundation, and publisher Art India, Sangita Jindal. Art collector and patron, Sunita Choraria. And director, Kamalnayan, Bajaj Hall and Art Gallery, Sunaina, Kejriwal. They will be in conversation with Managing Director at Teamwork Arts and our Symposium Co-Convenor, Sanjoy Roy.
Thanks so much. Thank you. Welcome. I think the only reason why the four of us are on this panel is because all our names start with S. So this is Assad's plot to get all the S's together at the end of the day. So welcome, SSSS. Listen, at the end of the day, money speaks. So there's no question of calling them anything else but the wonderful S's. No adding of the A. Thank you so much, all four of you, for taking time out. And I'm going to take off from the last presentation, which showed you what the Aga Khan Foundation had done. Brought a whole lot of musicians together. I'm in fact arriving straight from Portugal, where I'd gone for the Aga Khan Music Awards, which was the first awards that the Aga Khan Foundation for Music did. And this is after 19 years of creating a platform for music across the world. And they basically work with traditional and classical musicians, and they brought different people together. And what was amazing is very much like what you saw, this incredible coming together of musicians from Egypt, from India, from Syria, from Lebanon, from Palestine, and each of them contributing an amazing amount to that particular weekend. How could they make it possible? Because the Aga Khan Foundation put out about $1 million in terms of patronage. Just the award money for the occasion was $500,000. They flew in 200 of us from across the world who work in and around the arts to be able to give us a sense of what tomorrow's great maestros and masters could be. And that really is the kickoff for today's session in terms of as we all know, right from the very beginning of time, the arts has always had to look to patronage. We've had to look at the Maharajas and the Rajas and royalty and the great fiefdoms to be able to support the art of the time. Of course, it came with its own. There was the court poet or the court jester, etc. Some who were not being supportive of that present royalty or owners had their heads chopped off. It's a little different today. Now you just stop their funding. But patronage really was the cornerstone of everything that the arts looked for. I was in France at Lyon for the Kejriwal Crime Fiction Festival just before I went to the Aga Khan program in Portugal. And there again, what did one find? The incredible amount of support that the state, meaning the city of Lyon, the government of France, that they put into the arts. They really believe that the arts is the cornerstone of being French, whether it's French film, French noir, French food, French conversations. They understand that that's the cornerstone of their very being, and they put a whole amount of state support into it. And the city gets involved, the mayors get involved, and it's quite remarkable to see how France collectively spends about 16% on the arts and provides over 11 million jobs in this particular sector. In India, as we know, it's always been somewhat problematic. We haven't had that kind of policy of supporting the arts as France has had or UK has had. We haven't had the tax requirements that, say, America used to be able to bring about great philanthropy to be able to promote the arts. We have something in between. We have, yes, some amount of support from the government for classical and traditional forms to be carried on through the generations. But more and more, we've had coming down from the Maharajas and then to the old industrial families, we've really had families like these who have put their money and their passion behind something that's driven them to be able to fund a particular form of art. And that's really what we're here to discover. What drives them? What makes this possible? What is the future? Can there be a policy framework? Do we need any kind of change in this whole aspect? I think, Madhu, come in front. Now, you should be part of this panel, but for some reason, you're sitting at the back. I mean, one of the reasons why we are here is primarily because of their support. So again, thank you very much for your support in making this happen. Sangita, I'm going to start with you. I remember a couple of, maybe last year, the year before that, I was driving past your wonderful house and I saw this beautiful created artwork that was hanging outside. So let me ask you, one is, are these ideas that are generated by you? Do you work with professionals? And if so, are they young, old, Indian, not so Indian? How does it work?
The idea was not my idea. I love meeting lots of people and they come to me for their beautiful, innovative ideas, and I try to support them. And I got very excited about what they did. And we have this lovely building at Jindal Mansion on Pedder Road, which is in the heart of Mumbai. And there was this street art association start from Delhi. And they said that we can transform this. And Manish Malhotra came and met me and said that I could do it. So I took a chance.
So for those of you who don't know, START are the people who bring artists from all kinds of disciplines, and they've transformed the landscape in Delhi using both public buildings as well as private buildings. I don't know whether much of that has happened in Bombay, where the START has been working.
A little
here.
bit, yes. They did the Sassoon docks. They had a whole exposition at the Sassoon docks. They have also done in Dharavi and also with Reliance office on the way to the airport. This public art.
But your interest in visual arts, meaning, is this a hereditary interest? Is it something that struck you? I remember you started by supporting the Big Photography Award with the Habitat Center years ago. I think that was your first sort of foray, at least in Delhi, in terms of something that was so visible.
No, actually, I have been involved in the art for many, many years. And to me, it was a journey. I also worked with Vijayabhai Mehta at the NCPA, and that's where I learned a little bit about the arts, and not only the visual arts, but it was music, dance, everything. So my little bit experience was meeting with Vijayabhai Mehta. I don't know if you know him very well. So I was at we had a center called the Jindal Arts Creative Interaction Center, and my mentor was Dr. Bhaba. I would go to Bombay House 2 hours a day, where he would tell me, Dikri, you do this. I learned a little bit from them. So for me, it is a passion, and I was fortunate enough to support anything which is beautiful and innovative. I did not have any kind of an agenda or a structure or anything that next year I will do this and next year there was no agenda. It was a passion, it was experiences.
Today you're seen to be the sort of chief philanthropist in the world of visual art. Is that a blessing or a curse?
I think it's a blessing. I'm fortunate to meet creative people, people who have gone out of the box, who are thinkers. To me, it is, I think it's a blessing. I wouldn't have met them otherwise.
Sunaina, you come from a family history where philanthropy has been very much part of the agenda. You all run the wonderful Jamnalal Bajaj Award, which, as everybody, including a colleague of ours, Mrs. Nair, who won, I think, last year's award, she said the gracefulness in which you all treat the awardees, irrespective of who they are, is incredible. And that's part of your tradition and heritage. Today, you've embarked on your own sort of journey. Tell us, what is it that's motivated you to take this journey forward?
Good afternoon, everyone. I grew up knowing philanthropy. My family was very much into it, and because of the Gandhian influence of the family, it's always been about simple living and high thinking and giving to society. My great-grandfather, Jamnalal Bajaj, brought about this idea. He always felt that he was just a trustee of his wealth, and it was to be used for a greater purpose, for giving back to his country and for helping everyone else around. So that is the philosophy with which we've grown up, and we continue even till today with all the various CSR activities we do, the foundation, the awards it runs. I was always interested in art. I majored in textiles. I did my home science, so color, design, always interested me. I never studied.
You've also done pottery and
Yes,
theatre.
yes, pottery in New York. We were living there. So I've done photography as well. So I was always interested in a broader art aspect, but I never studied it formally. And I started looking after the Kamalnayan Bajaj Hall and Art Gallery a few years ago. And it was running as it was running, and I felt that I needed to do something more. I wanted to do something more. I met so many young artists who would come and exhibit, and even our gallery is actually, it's philanthropy because we give it out at a very nominal rent, and it's about giving those young students from the JJ School of Art or just young artists who are not able, who are not picked up by commercial galleries and are not able to exhibit their works because they don't get slots or they can't afford it. So it's about giving to them, and I found so many of them were so creative, they were so good, but because they didn't get representation, they weren't out there, and I felt I wanted to do something more in this, but I felt I needed to educate myself first on it. So Tasneem is here, and so I did a one-year post-graduate diploma program at the Bhavdaji Art Museum on history of Indian art, modern and contemporary, and curatorial studies. Through that, I learned a lot. I met other gallerists. They were my lecturers, curators, art editors. And thus came about an idea for a show, which we just concluded last week. And it was an art and tech show. We put out a call on social media. Dr. Arshia Lokhanwala was my curator. She was my lecturer also at the museum. And we invited young artists on social media. We chose 9, and we put up their works. So for many of them, it was the first time putting up their work and developing a work, and Arshia mentored them. I must say it was very well received. I wanted a lot of youngsters to come, and this is where I feel that we need to get the younger generation involved. In our country, we don't have a culture of taking them to museums on a regular basis or having so many shows around, which is starting now. So I feel it's very important that we hold exhibitions which engage the minds, talk about something relevant. And art is always a commentary on our current way of life, on what's happening in the political environment. It's meant to be thought-provoking, and it's actually just being and a way of life. That's how I feel. And I feel it's very important for the youngsters to start imbibing this, to get them into the habit of enjoying this, and to make exhibitions which are interactive, which engage them. So they feel the need that they want to go and they would enjoy it, not just something they read and have to move on. So we've done this. It's my stamp or my hurrah was when my 2 boys, who are 8 and 16, I'm like a rock star in their eyes now. They say, Mom, what a fabulous show. You know, they just loved it. It was art and tech, all done by millennials, very interactive and thought-provoking, and they just loved it. So I hope to come up with shows like this.
So 2 quick follow-up questions to what you said. One is, you know, we are 1.3 billion of us here in India, and almost all of us think we can sing, write, you know, paint, do something that's artistic, because from cradle to grave, the Indian DNA is that we celebrate, and you know, we have. What is the responsibility as a patron of the arts to these people? That's one. And 2, is there a right age for you to expose the next generation, like you said, 8 and 16, is there a right age to expose the next generation and bring them into the fold or the fore of this larger arts world? Or is there a thing that, no, you first have to figure out the way of life and then you can worry about the arts?
I'm going to answer your second question first. So I truly believe there is no age. I believe art is a way of life. So even little babies, they say that they can see your primary colors, red, blue, yellow, green, those right in the beginning, and that attracts them. So I think what you grow up seeing and what you find most familiar around you, there's a higher likelihood of your getting interested in that and taking it forward. So for art, I don't believe there's any right age. You can take babies to the museum if the museum allows it. They will see, they may not decipher the full thing, what the museum is talking about, but that is where the training starts. And in art, the more you see, the more you read, the more mature you get, the more your eye gets trained to figure out what makes sense and what doesn't, and that's how you learn. And you're always learning. So with art, learning never stops, like with most things. The more you see, the more you read, the more you grow. And I feel it's very important to start kids off from a younger age, because if you don't capture that and they get into their digital that they are in now, digital is also a form of art, but then they are not that interested in going for all the other traditional forms of art. And I think it's important to have a very holistic view of the whole
And
thing.
my first part of my question, is there a responsibility as a patron?
So if I'm in a position to be able to support projects like this, I would like to, for two classes. One is for the upcoming artist, so to promote him, because these 9 young artists we worked with, I just found their energy so fresh, their ideas so fresh, and it was really invigorating. For a week before the show opened, we had them come. They came from all over India, and a couple of them are students from the Art Institute of Chicago. So we got them down. They stayed here for a week. I spent morning to night with them. It was so much fun, just seeing the way they think, the way they work, the way they collaborated with each other. They didn't know each other. They were all, but the way in those few days they started helping each other out and upgrading each other's works. It was just really interesting to see this. So I feel I would like to do it for them, and I would like to do it for the youngsters who came and saw the exhibition, because I had a few schools come in, and the kids really loved it. It made them think of a few things. They said, yes, we know this now, we've been through it. But a few things they said, yeah, it's making us think about how we should be doing things in our life. So it was very relevant about the technology we are using today, our selfies, our social media, how we're interacting, the cyber abuse that happens. So a lot of it resonated. So if that has attracted, and because some kids came and saw it, they told their friends, they told their other friends' parents, they all got their kids and came. So I would like that to happen, so to serve both purposes, for the artist and for the audience.
Sunita, you and your husband have sort of been collecting art for 25 years or more, and you've got this huge collection. Tell us a little bit about your journey and what got you off to be able to do that.
So our collecting began actually as a way of spending time with each other. Because whenever you travel abroad, the way what Vijay and me very soon realized, that the one thing that was common, which is not shopping, but the one thing that was common was actually going to the museums and looking at art. Then when we came back and we wanted to spend time with each other, so then we said, let's try finding out what is the art scene in the city. And slowly the city became the nation. And it became a serious bug. Saturdays were devoted for just spending time looking at whatever gallery is going to, and that time there were no gallery listings, so really finding the dealers in their homes.
I thought Chemold was
Chemold,
they've been around
Pandol,
forever,
but Chemold and Pandol, they were tiny hole-in-the-wall spaces, and if you hadn't, and I'd keep meeting Keku, and anyway, so that's another funny story, but for another day. So, and then when we got very, very entrenched into the Indian art scene. Viewing art, literally going to galleries week on week, month on month, getting to know the artists, the gallerists. So we became embedded in that entire scene from that end. Very few people that we knew who you know, were on the same trajectory. And then when we kind of got a bit more angsty, we started traveling for art. Started going to the biennales, to the Documenta, to the fairs internationally. I think I've done Frieze, London, maybe 14 years or 15 years. So, you know, it's just a curiosity bug that actually, I mean, now I land in a city and the first thing I will go is check out their relevant art, contemporary art spaces. And I have, over the years, realized that that's really what draws us, the contemporary arts. And then with our travels, we kind of came across the concept of public art, because you go to Paris and you go to New York, you go to London, and you see art in not just on the street, but you'll see it encased beautifully in the lobbies of fabulous buildings. So my husband was building a mall in Chennai, and I said, you have all this space. So, and I was particularly, and so there was a joke. At the Time Warner building in New York, there are those two huge boteros. I'm like, why can't we just get those boteros and put them here? So that became, of course, then trying to realize that led us on another very interesting journey, because then we started not just meeting the gallerists and the artists, but now we were dealing with many other practitioners who were engaging in whether curation or installation, light. So we were now meeting the back end. And through that came about exposure to other people or other organizations, art organizations that were also driven to putting either public art forward or encouraging, providing platforms for cutting edge, experimental art across various multi-disciplines, which are not even considered as art for many who are uninitiated. I mean, I had no idea. I mean, for the first time when I came across a video art, I'm talking about 15 years ago, I was like, a movie can be art? Like I thought making movies is making movies. And so, just these notions that got dispelled. But I mean, if I was to go, so in Chennai, I remember when we put up, so in Chennai, we have put up all kinds of art. We have sound art, we have a platform for text art, we have video art.
You have an audio installation as well?
Audio, that's what we have a Yoko Ono piece going on in the lifts. So there's this cough going on and everybody's kind of looking at each other. So it's kind of funny, So we have all kinds of, it's about, an art is meant to be about fun. And the whole idea is, in the absence of contemporary art, museums and other than galleries, the spaces, see, galleries are viewed slightly elitistically. Sadly, we don't have contemporary art museums in the country. And now, and even if in the future, or in Delhi, for example, you do have the KNMA, one of the most phenomenal institutions devoted to the Indian art. But how do you get the audiences to come there? So we said, let's turn the thing on its head. People come to the mall anyways. And if they will see art, they will engage with it and interact with it. And we have seen phenomenal response there, which has only prompted us. So when we did our second, the addition to the mall, we kind of went even more experimental. Actually, for the opening, we had performance art going on. We had Shilpa Gupta's shadow work play going on. My husband allowed for 2 of the shop spaces to be not rented out so that we could install art. And we have ceiling projections of a mega scale going on. So it's just about really pushing. I mean, we have photography going on. We have, sculpture installations. Then now it's become also a hub where people kind of expect to see, which is good because it's becoming at least an attractive center for that. And then we hosted the Chennai Photo Biennale. We were one of the big venues for it this year. So, and over the years, because coming across so many practitioners and like-minded people, of course, the Kochi Biennale, art an art biennale by artists. So naturally, and because as I said earlier, that artists and gallerists were my first set of friends in this world. And so then we became patrons there. We've supported it ever since in every which way we can. I remember we walked in, you realized there were no fans because they had run out of funds to be able to put fans. Vijay says, how many do you need, So it's just being responsive. Then, so Kochi Biennale is, of course, a project which we're very, very supportive of. Then there's Koj, which we've supported very much when they finally got their new space in Khirki, which is again, and it began by the artists for the artists to be able to create
and experimental for the community.
work.
In Koj, it was also for the community.
It later turned for the community. Earlier, it began by the artists for the artists to be able to create experimental works that could not be put forth in a gallery space. And then, of course, now it's about being an incubation space for any kind of experimental art and providing a platform for artists to be able to network, to learn from each other, and for all kinds. And then recently I've been asked, I've joined the board of FICCI since a few years. And again, that's about how do you get art across to a wider audience, and then providing grants for learning, whether it be for artists, writers, curators, across the board, public art.
So let me ask, the three of you, each of you have spoken in such an impassioned way of what you've done. You seem to have got back much more than you've actually given. Is that true?
It's a way of life. I think it's a way of life.
I think the satisfaction you get and the immense satisfaction you get knowing you're making a difference and affecting people, helping people, I don't think you can compare it in monetary terms. So I don't.
I'm addicted. I wouldn't know how to exist otherwise.
So why aren't there way more people who've taken a feather from your collective book and have gone out and done what each of you have done? What is stopping other families or other wealthy? There you have Warren Buffett and the Microsoft whole thing saying give away X amount of percentage, and of course Yasmin and Azim Premji have done that. Many people have signed up. What is stopping major Indian families from doing much more, given that there's such an enormous need out there, 1.3 billion people wanting a platform? What's stopping them?
I think that there are many, many such industrial families who are doing their bit. Some people may get addicted to art or heritage or music, but I think there are many such people who can afford it, are obviously trying their best. I don't think that they're not doing it. If you look at when we grew up, there were the Birlas who have always helped out their temples all over India. You look at others who have done extremely well. So as the business grows, I think each corporates are finding their own niche. If you look at Mr. Nilakeni, they have spent money on education. So I think each to their own. So I think we cannot judge that why they're not doing it. I think everyone is doing their bit as per their capacity.
I agree with her, but I would also like to add on a very lighter note, I think you need a few crazy people like us who have the monetary power to be doing this. You have to have that inclination, you have to have the belief, you have to have the faith that, yes, this makes sense, and it's not about looking at it in commercial terms as to what you're going to get back monetarily, but you have to feel that, yes, this is important and I'd like to do this. So.
I come from the space of contemporary arts, and what I've understood is you have to stay current with contemporary art. You have to find out there's the tiny Mumbai art room, which is a curatorial hub that's happening and needs support, or there's an Eve Lamel who's putting up an art residency and would like support of venues. And then And then you need that madness. So it's staying very, I mean, in our space, it's really about.
So each of you have again talked about the madness, the craziness, the passion. Do we need a professional group within this space to be able to take it forward? And if so, what is it that you all have done individually, say for example in Hampi, one of the biggest undertakings ever of being able to restore and preserve what is one of India's jewels, which is now part of the UNESCO World Heritage Site. What have you all done to be able to professionalize that space? And do we need to do more? And as each of you, what is it that you think that should be done or have done?
I think we have the madness, but in order it to happen, we need a professional team. And they actually see it through. I have learned a little bit from the World Monuments Fund in New York, and they have their own strict edicts. And we had a professional team to handle the 4 temples that we have done in Hampi, and also our museum that we have done, again with a professional team. So the madness starts first, but professionalism is the key. Without that, nothing works.
Yeah, I think same here. I think I can talk about the Bahaudaji Art Museum, where there was a tripartite agreement between the foundation, our foundation, INTAC, and the BMC. So I think it's always good to be very clear as to what your role is, and our role primarily is to support financially and give ideas, but we are very clear that we don't want to be running it. So that was very clear who would be running it, and for every project we get into, we do that. And of course, then you have a management team who carries forward, make sure the payments happen on time, things are in process, any problems, whatever we can help, we do. So you have to have a team under you who does that. And likewise, we've just signed up for the Baikala station for the restoration, and it's one of our oldest railway stations. It's a heritage structure. We've just signed up with I Love Mumbai, so we're very clear who's going to be running it and who's going to be supporting, giving the funds. So I think it's good to be very clear right in the beginning how it's going to be sustainable, how the work will be completed, because there won't be any shortage of funds, but what is the budget, we stick to that, make sure that we stick to that, and then who runs it and maintains it going forward. So it's very clear. It's very important to have the whole plan very clear in the beginning.
I mean, Vijay and me come again from a space of passion and being very driven by what we come across. And because we travel a lot, again, for art, so we're part of the International Council of the New Museum in New York, a cutting-edge contemporary art space. You know, when you come across people and you see how many ways people can support it, it can be driven by by what we come across at that point. And of course, there is a need for hiring professionals or other art practitioners who are more proficient in that space. So we did, you know, you have a curator, you have an installer, you have, you know, handler, blah, blah. So you have to put in that infrastructure. But, I mean, the way Vijay and me, with our art foundation, which is called Artsy, we have been more driven by the need of the hour. And when you come across people who are driven by major passion, either lending forces or engaging with them and collaborating.
You know, you're talking again about in your process, you started with Bombay and then more and more started traveling the length and breadth of India and the world. When it comes to India, Sunita, what do you think is this need of the hour that you've talked about in terms of creating sustainable platforms for this kind of work? And the second question is, do you feel that you all and this is to all three of you, that you all as philanthropists have a responsibility to now also invest in the administration and the creation of the arts ecosystem?
So I mean, the second part is, that's primarily what Vijay and me do. When we're supporting a coach or a FICCA, which is supporting the very creation of these resources and these art practitioners, that's how we're doing it indirectly or directly by supporting that causes. Regarding what we need to do, what is the need of the hour? I mean, finally we are going to have a pavilion in Venice. I mean, hurrah. The need of the hour is really to understand that contemporary art or modern and contemporary art or visual art, that it is not just a luxury that must be attended to after all the other problems of India have been resolved. That it is a concurrent need, that it can run parallelly. The problem is, well, I mean, we all know where the problems are. So it is really developing. I mean, I think establishment of museums, providing a financial impetus for people who want to do philanthropy in art to make it attractive for them, that in itself, I mean, in America you have the largest funding of collections to the existing museums because it is so financially attractive. And it gets shared, nobody has to look after it, their collection gets forever archived. It becomes a legacy. So the thing is, we need an entire think tank on how do you first create. I mean, I think the need of the hour is the museums. Having the museums. Come the museums, you will have a museum-going audience, which will develop a habit of it because they know it's not a pop-up. It's there to stay. So once comes the museum, then develops a museum-going audience, and then comes about more, everything multiplies. Education happens because there's a museum. Somewhere you can go and see something for real. I mean, you walk around any museums internationally and you will see always children sitting there against the artwork trying to decipher it. It's hands-on learning. Everything in India stays abstract as a notion. And I think really to put it into brick and mortar and to make it happen really is.
I think one of the things we must put into the white paper is this whole aspect that she's talking about, but also again, it goes back to the chicken and egg, that without professional management, how do museums run? Because today we have many public museums. We have very few museums like the Bhadaji Lal and Lekha's Museum and Kiran Nadar Museum. And those work in a particular way. And of course, more and more people are being attracted to it, etc. But the length and breadth of India's wealth still sits in the public museum. I mean, you must have been to the Chola Bronze Museum in Chennai, where the guy, if you want to go and see it, I don't know whether you guys have been, but the fellow will come in his cycle from the main museum, open the tala, the Chola bronzes are covered in dust, and yet the same 26 of the bronzes when they were displayed at RA, Royal Academy of the Arts, 4 or 5 years ago, there were lines across the block every day for the 6 months that it was displayed. But we have no sense of doing that at all.
So yes, you're right. We may not have the most incredible museum directors already just sitting there. Because as you said, it's a chicken and egg situation. Since we don't have the museums, people don't even realize it's a profession that is attractive or plausible. But there's no dearth of Indian art practitioners across the globe who are already participating in it. Should you establish a center, you will attract talent.
Sangita, what stops people from going to museums in India? The National Museum right now has this incredible collection in Delhi going on. I don't think there's a human being that goes to see it. What stops us? And yet the minute we get to London or New York or Paris or Lyon or wherever, we make a beeline. What stops us?
Before I say that, I want to add to what Sunita was saying, that what happens is each of us are following our own passion, but none of us have worked collectively together. It's egos are involved, and there is no such system where all of us could all work together for a larger goal. As far as the museums go, we have to work with the government. We have a culture minister, which none of us have ever met.
I have.
You have, but none of us have ever met. So if all of us collectively go together, including the artists, the industrialists, or the philanthropists, together and explain to them the problems. I mean, we were a part of the NGMA earlier when Sarjuben was the main person, and she would invite us to the NGMA. And now none of us ever go there. And we all wonder why all this happens. I'm saying exactly what Sunita was saying, that there is no curator. I'm an Eisenhower Fellow. 6 years ago, I went to America with the sole purpose that we will try and train the museums in our country. I failed. I went all the way to Delhi and said that, sir, let us get a curator, let us have more people, let us have public programs. But it was maybe one or two individuals who went on the way. Tasneem battles all the time. Sarju battled all the time. But none of us actually did it. So if we are having these conferences, if all of us can actually make a plea to the government who actually handles the museums. We say we all need museums. Yes, all of us want to make a museum, but that all will take a lot of time. Land is precious. Buildings are precious. But if we can utilize what we already have, that is what is important.
So just to thank you both again for bringing them together. They've been talking about, coming together on the same platform. So thank you for coming together. What stops you all from working together?
Well, that's the point.
So
No,
I would
seriously.
I mean, this is something I will tell you from experience. So being on board of an international museum, we're fellow collectors from across the globe. The point is, come a neutral organization, such as a new museum, or it could be Tate, or it could be MoMA. What have they done? They've created a platform of patronage for fellow like-minded, passionate collectors to come together. And those people fund or pool ideas and thoughts. I mean, in our new museum meeting, we actually sit and debate where the monies are going to go, which exhibition is it going to support. And I am almost like an ambassador for the Indian contemporary art scene there, in that room. So the point is, when you create a platform, and the thing is, and she's very right, there are egos involved. So it has to be a common neutral platform. And when I'm talking about museums, I'm not necessarily talking about private foundations. I am genuinely talking about state-owned national museums.
Sunaina, you talked about legacy when you were saying. All of this finally handing over, I mean, in much of Europe, etc., most people hand over their private collections, they allow access, it gets archived, and those becomes incredible legacies. When V.S. Naipaul, before he died, he gave his entire writing to, I think it was Brown, for some undisclosed sum of money and so on and so forth. There is a principle of doing that there in that sense. While we, families, businesses, corporates, want to leave a legacy behind, the Birlas have created temples, etc., which is also, of course, about real estate. But what is stopping other families from understanding the need for this legacy creation?
You'd really have to ask them. I think it's just it's just a way of thinking. It's just a way of feeling.
Actually, I think our business is just growing. I mean, past 20, 25 years, we were nothing at that time. So I think we cannot handle legacy as well. We are still working, we are still growing. We are not even thinking of our legacy. So we are all trying, and I mean, you see, if you look at the Bajaj group, they've been well known for many, many, many years, many decades. So maybe that's why they're talking of legacy. Maybe after, maybe next generation, then we'll talk of legacy. We are still growing.
So as you grow, what in your head is a plan for the next generations to be able to take on what you've been doing?
I think it is this happens, I learned from my mother. I learned about art because of my mother, because she has her own center in Ahmedabad. So I'm adding my bit. My children will get something that I do in my life, and they will then learn on their own. Like, out of my 3 children, none of them, when they were young, they weren't interested so much in art. After marriage, after children, one of them is very excited about art. And maybe the second one will, or maybe the third person will. So I think this all comes on its own. There is no tutorial thing that you have to do this. It's all out of passion and love.
Sunaina, in your case, it is a tutorial. Your entire family in every way is steeped and tutored to very much be the philanthropist in the way that has come down through generations. Tell us a little bit about what that process is.
So actually, it started with stories I would hear from my grandmother. My great-grandfather, Jamnalal Bajaj, was known as Gandhiji's 5th adopted son. He gave away his entire wealth, land, everything that he had to Gandhiji for the freedom struggle. And then my grandfather is the one who really started taking the companies forward. Actually, till the 60s, we really didn't have much in terms of wealth. It was all given for India, for India's freedom struggle. So I heard stories. My grandparents were all involved in the freedom struggle. I heard stories from my grandmother about time in jail and what Gandhiji would say, what Nehruji would say. And, you know, she just spent so much of her time with them. Her kids were born. My dad, I remember, stayed with my with his nani nana because his parents were always in jail. So I think it starts off there. You hear these stories. It's the way you live. I grew up in Pune. We stayed on my father firmly believed that wherever the main company was, you must live on the premises close to that. So those days in the 60s, he moved to Pune. It was just a jungle. We had deer, we had snakes. We grew up with all of that, with nature. Very, very primitive way of living. But I feel that growing up that way, we ended up being so grounded, because when you live in nature and you don't live in a materialistic way, you can really deal with anything in life later on. It prepares you to face all kinds of hardships, challenges. So it's the way you grew up also. So like I said, very simple living, high thinking. The thought was always to give, to do something better for society in whichever way we can help. We went to school with our drivers' kids, employees' kids on the school bus. So it was the way my parents instilled those values in us, the way we felt and thought. And growing up now, coming to my children, I have unfortunately not been able to give them that kind of life, the simple life, but definitely the values. So the way I am, they see it, how we think, feel, and this is how we are taking. And we have actually a permanent exhibit in the hall and gallery. I don't know if you've seen it. It's on my great-grandfather's story on his life, and it very clearly documents what all happened. Quotes from Gandhiji, his letters, they're all there. So we've grown up hearing, reading, seeing all that. So it just becomes part of it.
Before I open it up to the audience, Sunita, last question. What are the 2-3 challenges or roadblocks? I mean, you alluded to it a little while ago, being a philanthropist, etc. What is it that can change or be brought about, whether it's taxation or policy, to make it easier? We know what the models are like, whether it's in Brazil or whether it's in the United States or France or UK. What do you think could work in the Indian milieu, which is very specific and special?
I think basically there has to be more engagement with art. The moment there are more people who are actually engaging with art, by that I mean viewing, regularly going and seeing what's happening, be it in the galleries or in the museums, following that, it brings about a cultural shift. It's like people go for the latest movie, people will go to eat in a restaurant, people will go to some new hotel or God knows whatever. Point is, do we go and try to see what is the latest gallery listing and what are the shows going on in the city? I mean, there is some scene. It may not be as vibrant as New York or Paris or London, but there is definitely, I mean, there's a room full of people here who are all interested in it. The point is to develop a culture, as I say, of viewing. And therein begins the passion, and therein begins engagement, and therein begins, therefore, maybe a further desire to try to see how can you more deeply involve yourself in this world, if it starts giving you pleasure, which it will, because it is a very, I mean, it's sensorial, right? This entire world of arts and culture.
I think there has been a beginning, and you can see it not just in the Bombays or Delhis, but across. We certainly in theatre, this year at our Meta Awards, we had over 400 submissions, smallest towns and villages across the length and breadth of the country. One of the plays that won was from Jabalpur. It was a play called Agarbatti, based on Phulan Devi, the widows that Phulan Devi created, etc. And what was amazing is when we started 15 years ago, the language productions outside of Hindi or English, there would not be a human being in the hall, barring the jury. Today they're packed, so there are people coming out across the arts. You can see it in music, concerts, and arts. So perhaps there is an awakening in many ways, much more to be done, and I hope we're able to continue these kinds of conversations thanks to FICCI and Avid. Open it up to the House. Did you want to say something before?
I just want to say, I sometimes want to almost forgive India, because we're a very old country, but we are a very young nation. We're still finding our ways. And then there are little sproutings going on. And I'm sure there are so many invested people, it has to go forward. We're just maybe front runners or precursors or feeling slightly isolated, but there have been many great people ahead of us who have allowed us to get to where we are. India could not have a rich cultural heritage if there hadn't been patrons, as you very well mentioned right in the beginning. And so it shall. Yeah.
It will. We have people like Abhay here in the room who will continue and question. Do we have?
Well, I just wanted to really compliment these three ladies. And I wanted to say particularly about Sangita that she's been very modest. She started Art India, and I worked with her on her first editorial board. And Art India has really shifted the needle in terms of what it was able to do for the arts, and of course her patronage for heritage. But I think she hasn't really talked about this. She's had huge impact because she's been around for 20, 25 years. She's been doing this, and so I just wanted to pay a compliment and also just say that the reason that people don't give their collections, like if a Sunita, who has an amazing collection of art, wanted to give it, where is the museum that would be able to look after it? Because you would give it to a museum, your collectors, and you want them to come forward and share their collections with a museum. Where are the museums that have the people? There are not only that, Sanjay, there are not even museums exchanging between themselves. India has the most incredible artifacts. We don't get to see everything in Bombay because we just don't have the infrastructure to be able to accept or travel. Government is so nervous about sending these collections. They're just now starting to talk about being able to do that.
We can hear you.
Yeah, my name is Kim Singh. I'm an art dealer in California. I want to ask you, because you interact a lot with the government, okay, and we see what Sunita and Vijay have done in Chennai and elsewhere. I think you cannot depend on the Indian government to do anything. It has to be private initiative. There is a lot of money here, with the Wipro, Mr. Premji, and other people. This private, they are not taking the steps towards art. If you make the museums, people will come. You cannot expect the government to take any initiative as far as India.
I don't think we should expect government to do anything, but the problem in India is that everything is tied up in red tape and a commission. As we can see with Bhaudaji Lal right now, the problems that they have. So everything comes back to that once, good, bad, ugly, Sarkar, Babu will say, ye kar sakte hai, nahi kar sakte. And therein is the problem. It's not about the lack of resources. Resources, nobody's saying government necessarily needs to give. It's just that government ties itself up in knots, which is what I started in the morning Today, to do any show in Bombay, I don't know about the visual arts world, but any show, you need 27 permissions, 27, if it's an international. And you can't do it, because somebody or the other will want some favor in whatever way. It's a nightmare.
So the question I have, following on Mr. Jindal's idea of like collectivizing, can we get together, your story about trying to get the museums to change their ways. Based on the morning from what the Culture Secretary said to us, and you're also on the FICCI board, you're seeing some deliberate effort of government to try and figure things out on behalf of the 1.3 billion people, correct? And over here, apart from your patronage that you have, because of the fact that there are families behind you that have also business interests, and just the way that the corporate side of your family or the business practice side of your family has massive lobbying power with the government towards those needs. Is there something, are there any thoughts about what that side of your families or that side of business families in general could do with the government to get them to change their mindsets and do the things that we are all saying they need to do? I mean, I know I'm talking very idealistically, but there is a huge unsaid power in that side of advocacy, right?
Why is it that we've jumped into FICCI's stomach? I mean, one of the reasons I said that we need a major trade industry body which will represent our concerns of the arts world is this, that government would take the trade and industry body's representation far more seriously than perhaps if any of us, all of us have long hair, any of us went, I don't think they would take it that seriously as they do if I say I'm
Can we hear
come from
the
FICCI.
panel's thoughts on the business power of, say, the families or other families, not just yours, obviously, but, and I don't expect you to speak for every family out there.
So I have been seeing, CII has been working and lobbying and has finally succeeded in managing to get an Indian pavilion in Venice. And CII.
Well, actually, it was actually
Feroz who
started
first.
this thing,
Yes,
and
I
then
mean, you have to first give credit to Feroz
government
Gujral.
gave them the money and
Yeah.
long
So
story.
long stories, many behind the scenes politics. But the point is, there are women. Yeah, there are women who are putting their weight. Then the women come with men with a lot of, other monetary.
But the lobbying is still not happening. Sangita, do you want to talk about influence?
So I think there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and there's hope. And I think now people are feeling that we should all work collectively. There are many patrons who are kind of getting there, and one great feat is that somehow we have managed this pavilion in Venice, which is great. And I think everyone is supporting, although Kiran took the leap, which we are very, very glad. So I think there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Hello. That was private. That was done. Feroz had done it. Feroz Gujral.
Many years ago,
Before
yes.
that, there was
The
nothing.
government, yes. Once there was a pavilion that was put up. Yeah.
I'm Abhay Mangaldas. Hi. I have what you said was very interesting. And I have an issue with this museum thing, so I just wanted to share it with the ladies. What Sunita said about getting the art into her mall is, I think, the way to go. Because why are we worried about Venice? If Sangita were to get art to her steel factories and on the ports, that will bring the involvement of the lowest 1.3 billion. Why do you want to build more museums, And why should art be in museums at all? If it is for the public, in fact, it should be completely rethought and be outside museums.
I agree with you. Public art is very, very important. We all tried. We did this with this thing in our building without the government. We're trying to do something at the Priyadarshini Park many, many years ago. So it is very important that art should be everywhere. As you're saying that factories, we already do whatever we can in our factories. That is definitely, but that is the select people.
Why is it select? It's how many people do you employ?
We have about 5 lakhs.
Then, how many people go to a Bombay museum? Tasneem?
So I'd like to just add to that.
Abhay, I just want to respond to that. Abhay, not necessarily all art can be placed outdoors.
Right.
So you need museums to be able to maintain some of the arts that need temperature control, humidity control, UV control for it to even exist or for it to exist. Sustain.
Can I just
add a word, please?
Yes. Yeah.
Hello.
Can I just
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jigna.
Well, that's going into a very big philosophical discussion. That should art be just public or should it be for a private individual?
So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jigna. I'm also an artist.
An
and as
extension
far
to that
as
point.
One second, just hold that.
sensitizing everybody and the people into art and appreciation of art, I think we need to introduce it at the school level and at the college level where children are introduced to art. These very children will then go into bureaucracy and understand the need and the desire. Today our bureaucrats, I'm sorry to say, but not everybody is keen and understands the need that art should be an important aspect of our learning. Sure. Because it is very much a de-stressing factor. Today the stresses levels are very, very high and very few people of us like you all understand that it needs to be more widespread. But the teaching should start at the school level where children are taken to museums. Then there will be need for more museums. They should start in a very small way, maybe in the villages and all, where local art is displayed, and slowly it grows through philanthropic
The NCERT and CBSE new programs does have a scheme like this that they've started.
Yeah, just to extend Abhay's point, I've lived in Bangalore a number of years and I've known some very, very prominent artists. And many of them are being sustained there exactly in the way he's saying, because this art is bought in bulk by many of these beautiful buildings by the IT companies, and they're being actually sustained that way. And you see these in these beautiful buildings, in the lobbies, in some of their prominent meeting rooms, etc. And automatically there is a sensitization happening, you know.
All of DLF, that's
yes.
there.
Apart from that, there's another prominent sculptor called Balan Nambiar. His works have been put in several places in Bangalore, different sorts of metal, you know, bronzes, steel, things like that. And this has become some of the public art in Bangalore. So I think this could be a good side, you know, one sort of, yeah.
Last
question to him. I want to react to.
I'll just make a closing. Oh, sorry.
I want to react to sometimes the kind of public art that does get put out, because I sometimes think that if there is no proper curation of what is getting put out there, and that's what people are growing up to believing that this is good art.
Absolutely.
Sunita, do you know that in the Smart Cities Fund, every city is given, as you know, 1,000 crores, of which one silo is supposed to be for culture and the arts. So for 3 years, no spend was done. This year when KPM, because I've been haranguing KPMG and PwC saying, you have to do this, make sure the cities spend. This year when the report came, all the cities had spent 100% of their fund. So then I said, on what? On building statues.
Okay. I'll just take on the offer, Sangita ji, what point you made, and Sunita ji. As Aurat, Rishi Raj from Aurat, we are working concertedly now on building a platform for lobbying and representations called Art Infrastructure Solutions. Encourage you to look at that site as well. We are working on thought leadership with Ernst & Young on tax considerations, valuation, etc. We'd love to do a one-to-one meeting and see how that can be a great platform along with FICCI to create policy frameworks and represent the government. Thank you.
Hi, I just want to give a neutral statement out here. I stay very close to the Baudaji Art Museum, and it's been 46 years I've never been to the museum. Okay, now I have this lady out here sitting next to me, Tasneem, and we got an invite saying there are events happening like Canada film playing, and then there is this handicraft stuff happening there, and there's people coming from all over Assam, and they're creating some new stuff using some black stone, and we have no clue of that. And I have a young daughter, and she said, let's go to this place. And now she tells me, Papa, when are we going there again? When are we going there again? The only idea is, how do we make museums interesting? I mean, she's done a really good job. I mean, I thank her for making our children go to museum. And she's a live effect out here.
Sanjoy,
And there's a music happening there.
needs to leave. Yeah, okay.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Asad. Thank you, Madhu, for making this happen. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to our wonderful panel. We could have continued this conversation, which we will at some point. Over to you, Asad.
All right, just everyone's thanking each other, but thank you to our part. Firstly, thank you, audience, for being here. We've had over 200 people here throughout the day. I think next time we need a longer conference because everyone has too many more questions. I mean, you know, the last one we did had so many next steps. The white paper that was presented to Congress, along with you know, other changes that we had. Hopefully, some of the next steps from this discussion will make positive steps towards in the arts industry. Thank you to all our partners. I have to just mention their names because they've been really kind. FICCI, thank you to Vikash, Leena and Dilip. The Consulate General of Mumbai and Canada, Maitri and Etienne. To Bakoni, Ale and his team, thank you for your support. Teamwork Arts, Sanjoy and Sanjay. And to Culture Shop for helping us put this conference together. Thank you for being here. All these videos will be on YouTube in the next few days, and there will be a report written which will be shared with you if you're liked digitally. Thank you.